Welcome to the ISMP Medication Safety Podcast, sponsored by Novartis Rights Creation Team. My name is Alex Savchuk, PharmD, and I'm the postdoctoral fellow for Novartis in Rights Creation. In this podcast, we'll be discussing issues with the use of COVID vaccines. Today, we have the opportunity to speak with Sadiq Owolawa, PharmD, who is the 2022-2023 FDA ISMP Safe Medication Management Fellow. Prior to his fellowship, Sadiq worked at a variety of community pharmacies and has experience with providing many vaccinations, including the COVID vaccine, as well as counseling patients on safe medication use. Our first question today is, which vaccines are currently available to the public in the United States?
All right. Thank you for the question and the introduction. So the vaccine that we currently have available right now in the United States are Moderna vaccine, Pfizer vaccine, Johnson, and lastly, Novavax vaccine.
Thank you. So what is the current recommended dosing schedule for COVID vaccine? And how long after the initial dose do you wait to get a booster?
All right. So right now we have most of them are two-dose primary series, except for the Pfizer. So for Pfizer, we have for 5 months to 4 years of age. It's a three-dose primary series, no booster for that age group. And between the first dose and the second dose, you wait 21 days. Between the second and the third dose, you wait 2 months for the age group of 5 months to 4 years of age. For 5 years of age and up, for Pfizer, it's a two-dose primary series. You wait 21 days in between the first and the second dose. And then you also have two-dose, we currently have two-dose boosters, also for the Pfizer 5 years and up, and you wait 2 months in between the boosters. Regarding Moderna, for 5 months and up, you have two-dose primary series. You wait 28 days in between the first and the second dose. And also, similar to the Pfizer, the Moderna also has two boosters currently available, and you wait 2 months in between each booster. And then moving on to Janssen, that one is restricted, but it's a one-dose primary series. And then for the booster dose, you wait 2 months to get a booster of whether you can either get Pfizer or Moderna for the booster for the Janssen. And then lastly, we have Novavax. Is for ages 12 and up, also two-dose primary series. You wait 21 days in between the first and the second dose, and then you have one booster for the Novavax, one booster, and that one also is 2 months after your second dose to get a booster.
Okay, thank you for that. So with all of the different types of vaccines, vaccine vial label colors, the cap colors, and different concentrations from the same manufacturer, what type of labeling and packaging errors have been reported to ISMP?
That's a good question. Just like you said, we get a lot of errors reported regarding localized packaging. For example, when the new Moderna booster came out, the bivalent booster, on the label of the vials, it said for booster only. But then if you look at the primary series, it also said for booster only as well. And the two vials look very similar. So that's one. You can say the same thing about Pfizer as well. The new booster, when it first came out, the packaging, the cap of the vial was gray. Similar to the primary series, the cap was also gray. The wording on the vials is very similar. The coloring also very similar. We also had a case. This does not have to do with COVID vaccine, but we had a case of hepatitis A vaccine being the adult formulation being accidentally given to a pediatric patient due to the vials being, the packaging being almost identical. Even the brand name of the vaccine were the same, Averex. So again, we get similar mix-up like that all the time.
Mm-hmm. And so what recommendations does ISMP suggest to prevent errors associated with the labeling packaging?
That's a good question. The first thing that comes to mind is, if possible, ISMP urges organizations and pharmacies to try to order from different manufacturers, if it's possible, to differentiate the products. If your organization already have this vaccine that look alike in your inventory, we urge these organizations to separate them out. For example, when you want to separate adult formulation from pediatric in the fridge, you want to use shelves and dividers, and if possible, use different bins, and that's clearly labeled to alert staff like, oh, this is for a pediatric patient only. We also want to make sure syringes are labeled. As you can see, most of these COVID vaccines come in multi-dose vials. So whenever a pharmacist is preparing a dose, make sure each dose is labeled clearly to avoid any confusion. And lastly, always use barcode scanning to confirm that you have the right vaccine. If all else fails, if you scan the vaccine, you'll be able to detect any mistake regarding the wrong vaccines.
Thank you for those recommendations. And so kind of going forward in this space, do pharmacies receive extra staffing during these seasons where there's high flu vaccinations and high amounts of COVID vaccines to account for all the extra immunizations that are administered? How does this affect the workflow in the pharmacy?
Oh, that's a great question. I wish I can tell, stand up here and tell you, yes, the pharmacy receives extra staff to deal with the increased workload. But the reality is actually the opposite, right? In fact, during the beginning of the COVID pandemic, there was actually like staff shortages, in which it was difficult to find people to work. And most of the time, the pharmacy have to do with giving out vaccination, also filling prescriptions with with the regular staff that they usually have. And sometimes the pharmacy will be by themselves doing all of this, giving out vaccine and also filling prescription for patient. And sometimes this can lead to the pharmacy trying to multitask, rush through, and the patient is the one that usually get the rough end of this because they have to wait longer in the store to get their medication. People also coming in to get their vaccine will also have to wait a little bit longer than they should have. So to answer your question in a one-word answer, the answer is no. They don't receive extra support, not always.
That's unfortunate to hear. And with this extra workload for the pharmacist and for the technicians in the pharmacy, what types of errors associated with the preparation and administration of the vaccines have been reported to ISMP?
Thank you. So, like I said, sometimes when the pharmacy has to rush to get from one vaccine to the next, the mistakes happens frequently. And one of the ones that commonly gets reported to ISMP is the case of a person coming in for COVID vaccine, but accidentally being given the flu vaccine instead, or a person coming for the flu and accidentally being given COVID. So we get a lot of that often, and also even at the beginning of the pandemic, when we had Paxlovid for patients with like moderate or severe vaccine, COVID vaccine. Moderate to severe COVID. Sometimes we get cases reported of patients who are like renal impairment being given the wrong dose. The pharmacist sometimes is supposed to remove a couple doses from the packet before giving it to the patient, but due to the increased workload and sometimes this step is sometimes missed and the patient is given the wrong dose. So we get a lot of that mistake often.
Thank you for that answer. And so with the preparation and administration of the vaccines. My question is, do we still reconstitute the vaccines? Is there like any waste? And what are the pharmacies doing to eliminate wasting vaccine?
Good question. So are we still reconstituting vaccines? Not like yes, but only a few. So we don't have to reconstitute Moderna. We don't have to reconstitute Novavax. We don't have to reconstitute Janssen. Even for Pfizer, for the age group of 12 and above, we don't have to reconstitute. The only one we have to reconstitute will be 5 months to 11. So we still have to reconstitute those, but everything else we don't have to reconstitute. Regarding step to mitigate waste for vaccines, pharmacists used to have a scheduling system in which a patient would be able to pick what time of the week they want to come in, what time of the day they want to come in to get their vaccines, and sometimes that will allow the pharmacy to bring out the appropriate amount of vials ahead of time to help those patients. So that's like one way that pharmacies try to reduce waste. But you're still going to have waste, but the scheduling system was very helpful.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely preparing in advance and knowing how many patients are going to be coming in that day would help mitigate waste. And so, what does ISMP recommend if someone realizes they received the wrong vaccine? For example, there's been concerns with potential mix-up with the COVID and flu vaccines. Who should they contact?
Thank you for that question. So, in case of a patient receiving the wrong vaccine, kind of like the one you just mentioned, you come in for a COVID vaccine, but you accidentally received the flu vaccine. The first thing the patient should do is contact their prescriber to let them know. That way, it can be documented in their profile. They should also inform the pharmacist as well. And I'll take it one step further. If you're the pharmacist and you realize, like, oh, you just gave a patient came in for COVID, but you accidentally gave that patient the flu vaccine, the first thing you should do is acknowledge the error and apologize to the patient. And if the patient have time, you can actually go ahead and give them the correct vaccine because both the flu vaccine and COVID vaccine are actually approved to be administered together. So just make sure you apologize to the patient and try to get them the right vaccine or have them scheduled to come back to get it.
Thank you for that. That's very helpful information. I'm sure a lot of people would benefit from knowing that. That's all the questions for me today. Thank you, Sadiq, for taking time to provide this information. If you would like to learn more information about ISMP or regarding errors associated with COVID vaccinations, please visit ISMP's website that is displayed on the screen. If you have any questions, please email ISMP at info@ismp.org. This now concludes our podcast. Thank you.
Thank you.